Welcome to Dating Deja Vu, the podcast that we talk about your patterns, your pitfalls, and your personal growth in dating and relationships. I'm your host, Christina Hathaway, marriage and family therapist and dating and relationship expert. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about green means go. What are the green flags in your relationship that we want to enhance and strengthen? And if you're someone who has a little bit of the same thing over and over again in your relationships, it might be deja vu, but it also might be you. So let's figure this out together. What's up, Deja Crew? Welcome back. Today's episode is going to be a flip. We're flipping the script on what we talked about last time. We often talk a lot about like red flags and what not to do, but what about the green flags? What about the things that are worth investing in your relationship? And, for some of you, green flags are happening and you don't realize because you're so overwhelmed or maybe fixated on the red flags. And so I thought this would be a good episode. Plus, we've talked a lot about like dating in general. And this is something that people in current relationships can really relate to. So we want to definitely focus on that. It's a lot of us are just conditioned to like chase the excitement, the chemistry, the drama, right? Things that don't necessarily lead to healthy relationships, which we've talked about in previous episodes. So I thought just breaking down like the real green flags, I'm wearing green, see? And the behaviors that lead to those stable, fulfilling, and lasting relationships would be super helpful for you, right? Sometimes the biggest green flags do not feel exciting. They right away can also feel uncomfortable to some of you. I, on my Instagram, talked about mine and my husband's story and how he would not bite at my shit, right? My red flags. He wouldn't bite at them. And luckily I had done my work on myself to realize I was doing them, but I was still trying to do like not the really mean stuff that I used to do, but kind of the passive aggressive stuff. And he wouldn't bite, right? And it felt scary, but also really safe, right? At the same time. So again, those green flags might not feel exciting right away. They can feel boring at first, especially if you've been in toxic or chaotic relationships before, right? So if you're tired of repeating those same mistakes, well, we are going to teach you the green flags. So if you're someone who, as we've talked about in the past, have been in relationships that are full of like love bombing, right? Or it's very hot and cold. There's constant drama. A stable, reliable partner may not trigger that spark, as we talked about, right? But here's the truth of this. Dysfunction can feel like passion when that is all you know. That's why green flags, again, might not feel so exciting at first, but they definitely should. So one of the things that we want to realize is how we've been conditioned to overlook the green flags, right? So we've talked about some of these, you equate excitement with love, right? You think a stable partner might be too nice or too easy. You chase who are emotionally unavailable, and you feel like relationships should have ups and downs to be real. I'm guessing that sounds familiar to a lot of you. I talk about it all the time. When I met my husband, I said, it feels vanilla. And that to me was a sign. I realized like you've been dating all of the people who are like Joe Mocha, Almond Fudge, Rocky Roads, right? You need vanilla, girl. You need vanilla in your life. And vanilla has been the best thing that has ever happened to me. And it's been we're able to make our own little swirl, right? So one thing that my husband provides to me is emotional stability and self-awareness. This is how we handle stress, disappointment, and disagreements, as we talked about in the last episode, and we do it in a mature way. We don't explode. We don't criticize. We don't stonewall. We don't blame. We don't, have these huge fights over super small things and then stonewall, right? What we talked about last episode for days and days. We're able to self-reflect, right? Able to self-reflect and own our mistakes instead of continuing to put that blame on others. And why emotional stability matters is because of the safety, right? The emotional safety I talked about in relationships. You're not constantly waiting for the other person's shoe to drop. You're not walking on eggshells. You don't feel like you one of the things I hear women say all the time is like, oh, I don't want to say that. What if he gets mad and like he breaks up with me? If you tell someone something and that's the reason they break up with you and it's your truth, then they're not your person. They are not a healthy individual. They are not emotionally safe. But when you can even come to someone with criticism about them and say, hey, this isn't working for me. This is when you do this, this hurts my feelings. And they can sit with you and have that conversation. Amazing. We absolutely love that. And for you guys out there who are dating, I want you to think about this. When you can have these conversations up front. Now, of course, like you have the first like couple dates, but now we're getting into like learning about each other. You can have these conversations up front. You're going to learn very quickly the level of emotional safety this person has. Now, yes, some people can lie, right? And pretend like they go along with what you do. So one of the things I said in my Instagram post, it was on my stories. I said, my husband didn't just tell me that things were going to be good. He showed me, right? Because if you forget the story, we broke up after dating for 4 months because he didn't want a girlfriend, ran into each other 2.5 months later. And then our relationship as we know it now began. And I was reluctant, but he continued to show me, right, that he was emotionally invested, right? So one example I have here is instead of snapping at you when they're stressed, right? They say something like, I had a rough day. I might be a little quiet and it's not about you. Intimacy. You're going to hear me say this probably once an episode. Into me you see. Tell them what you want. Tell them what you need. It's like the client I talked about earlier. She wants texts. That's her love language. Like she wants to communicate and she does not want you to do that over social media. And I said, communicate that. He probably doesn't know that, right? He might think in his mind, I'm communicating because I'm liking your stories and doing the things. But if you don't like that, tell him. If he has a problem with that, then you'll know. You'll know up front, right? So that's what that is. Maturity is key, right? Maturity, being able to talk, being able to apologize, being able to create safe space, being able to hear you, all the things, right? Number 2 is consistency over time. Their words match their actions, as I talked about, right? So again, when my husband and I were getting back into the relationship, I was very scared because I had invested 4 months. And y'all, I'm like 31. I'm not, this young kid. Like he was 34 when we met. And when we got back together, I was reluctant. But again, his actions, he would do these really nice things for me that he hadn't done before. Now, he wasn't mean before. We had a great time, but it was just on a different level, right? And consistency, even with communication, which I talked to you guys about, like set the communication up front. If you and people do this, like they'll be texting, 1 week every day, all day, and then the next week drop off. And if you're not a big texter throughout the week, don't start that way, right? You want to create that consistency over time. Because when you don't do that, you kind of start guessing where you stand with somebody, right? So if Mark like took me on these great dates and then didn't text me during the week or something like that, that it's not consistent, right? So why it matters is, love isn't about someone that does something for the first, 3 months or even weeks. It's about how they show up over time. And I will tell you that my husband is so consistent with how he shows up for me. There's rarely a time that he's just like, nah, he's set himself up in a way to be consistent. And that doesn't mean that, there will be times when he's going to need me more than I'm going to need him and vice versa. But the way we show up for each other is super consistent. So again, if it feels kind of like that roller coaster, it's probably not love. It's a pattern, right? So instead, we want to just have that consistency and setting it up front, you guys, so important. The next one is healthy and direct communication. So what it looks like is, again, expressing how you feel without blaming or attacking. I call this your reality, right? Your reality is your thoughts, your feelings, your wants, and your needs. And oftentimes we learn these kind of controlling mechanisms to keep us safe from sharing our reality. So some people will kind of mold their reality and what they think other people want, or they will share their reality and not listen to others. Like those are really toxic behaviors. We want to have a relationship where we can share and feel comfortable in those conversations. Listening to understand the person rather than just like respond to them or even create solutions for them, which I've talked about, like my husband likes to do sometimes. And having the hard talks, that is so important because, again, I've talked about this, how women tend to show up in relationships as if they're just like easygoing. You might be easygoing, but you're not always going to be that way, right? an episode we'll do, I saw this post, it was on the perfect girl syndrome of how you show up in this way and the guy thinks that you are this perfect woman and you're trying to fulfill that because you've learned to do that throughout your life, like smile, be pretty, have a successful job, do all the things, sparkle as we've called it in the past. But you're human and you're going to have emotions, you're going to have hard days. And if you don't have those conversations up front and you don't directly, are able to express them, and not even up front, but like, within the first 6 months, then once that happens, the person's going to be so blindsided by it because they've thought you're just easygoing this whole time, right? So instead of ghosting or dodging hard talks, we say, hey, I need to talk about something that's been on my mind. That's a green flag. And again, it could simply just be like, hey, I really prefer to, have a text at least once a day, right? I remember my husband went on a bachelor party, was one of the first when we started dating, and he didn't text me all day, all night. And I was like, the fuck? And he texts me every day other than that. And I finally was just like, look, I don't give a shit where you're going, what you're doing, other than obviously not having sex with somebody else or making out with someone else. But just text me once. Want to know you're alive. And he hadn't done that again. Oh my gosh, he did that again. Just recently, he didn't text me. Like he called me the night before and then he didn't text me until like later in the day. And I was just like, dude, you're in Mexico. I want to know you're alive. Just shoot a text over, right? So, it matters. Communication isn't just about how you talk when things are good, right? It's about how you handle those conflicts. And I will say he's been consistent with it. He did mess up this recent time, but we let him slide because, it was we were together like 10 years. So it's twice in 10 years. We'll take it. Okay. Number 4 is the person has a genuine interest and investment in you, right? They want to know all things about you. They want to invest in your dreams, in what you're pursuing in life. It's such a wonderful feeling. I cannot tell you guys. I mean, I've changed my career now since we've been together 3 or 4 times. Going from being a therapist to going into sales to starting the coaching business, and then kind of evolving into what it is now. My husband has backed me the entire time. It's insane. And he helps me with all this stuff, right? I think he knows though too, like I don't just make decisions to make them. Like I feel very confident in making those changes. And I think that helps him feel confident too. And I'm batting, 1,000 here because we haven't had any hiccups. Now this business, my coaching businesses, in which I have 2, the Mindset of Matter, which is a whole health coaching business, and then Ignite Ambition, which is my dating and relationship coaching business. They've done very well, right? And even in times where we're a little bit slower, I feel like still, he's there to help. He's there to provide solutions. So people who ask about your life, remember the small things and support your goals. I texted an old friend I used to work out with. I messaged her on Insta and I said, oh, are you still at this place? And she goes, oh my gosh, yes, working there. And she goes, how'd you remember that? I go, I just remember it really meant a lot to you to get that job. And she's like, oh, I absolutely love it. Da, da, da. That means a lot to people, remembering the small things. One thing that Mark does that I love is he'll just ask, what do you need from me right now? Because I believe we talked about that early on, that's something that's super helpful for me to feel supported. So, they're not just texting you because they're bored or lonely or it has some sort of, obviously texting you has some sort of incentive for that person, but like it's only for their incentive, right? It's only for, them, not you. They value your happiness as much as you value your own, right? So an example is if you mention that you have a big work meeting, they follow up and ask how it went, right? That is effort. It takes nothing, right? That's not this nice bag. It's not, it's so easy to do that. How did your speech go? When someone truly values you, they don't have to convince you that they care, right? They just show you. And the small things, man, like my husband knows I need an ice cube in my coffee. I don't like my coffee to be super hot. So when he makes my coffee, he puts an ice cube in it. I love it, right? I love it. So those are some of the green flags. How to follow through on green flags is the next segment I want to talk about because spotting them isn't enough, right? We need to have the willingness to pursue those green flags. So if you're used to those toxic dynamics, as we talked about, healthy relationships will feel different. They're going to feel uncomfortable. They're going to feel slow, boring, but that doesn't mean that they're wrong. And you want to ensure that, again, like I said, when I wasn't engaging in those passive aggressive behaviors, it was scary, but it felt so safe and at peace. And I just remember sitting there and it's like, he's not yelling back at me. Or no, it wasn't yelling. It was I'd be upset about something and he'd ask, like, are you okay? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm fine. Right. And he'd be like, okay. And he'd walk away. And I was like, shit, I didn't get what I wanted. Right. And so recognizing like this feels different for me because this isn't something I'm used to. I need to sit through the discomfort. One thing I tell my clients all the time, discomfort creates change. There is no way you can change without getting uncomfortable. And the beautiful thing about getting uncomfortable with green flags is it feels really good once you get through it. So while it might feel boring, it might feel like it's not passionate, eventually you'll be so connected that that's where that true passion and connection comes from. The next thing I want to make sure that we're not self-sabotaging a good relationship, right? So if you get the ick from those stable, kind, compassionate partners, then that's something you need to look at. You need to do your own work and understand why. And obviously this podcast will be helpful to you, but it's not enough, right? My clients and I, we go back, kind of audit what has gone on in their lives, and then we assess where they're at currently, and then we align with who they want to be and what relationships they want to have. So that process is very important, because if you're waiting for the spark that comes from the unpredictability, then it's not going to be there right away. The spark comes from that emotional, deep connection, as I'd already mentioned. And if that's something that you continue to self-sabotage, then that is time when I would hire a coach, like I talked about before, or a therapist, right? So embracing healthy love is super important. We want to recognize your patterns, right? Ask yourself, am I rejecting healthy love because it feels unfamiliar to me? And why, right? So be aware. And sometimes, as I say before, when we don't have that relationship with ourselves, it's hard for us to like recognize it in someone else because we've never felt it in ourselves. So like we don't know what like trusting ourselves feels like. So when someone's talking to us about their reality and how they feel, we almost feel like awkward because we don't have that in us. So again, always coming back to the self. Is it deja vu or is it you? What is it that I need to work on so that I can experience this with this partner more mindfully, I guess you would say, more in the moment? What do I need to do in myself to help me kind of enhance this with my partner? And giving consistency a chance, right? Giving that consistency a chance, as I talked about, real love grows over time. I love my husband more today than I've loved him ever in my life. Like, he is my rock. He is just, I don't even know what I would do without him. I don't even want to think about it, right? We did not have those instant fireworks. He was so real that he said, I don't want a girlfriend. And I said, I want a boyfriend. And we broke up, right? And, for him, he was like, I really did miss you, but I didn't want to show up this like shitty dude that was just like, hey, what's up? Right. It's like, I just knew that we would run into each other because we never crossed paths, but we had a lot of we ran in the same groups. And then communicate your needs, right? If someone is showing up as a green flag, they're not playing games, right? You get to tell that person what you want. And again, like I said, you're going to know if he's a green or a red very quickly when you show up with your green flags, your open communication, right? Your consistency, your investment in them. When you show up with green flags, you're going to learn very quickly if they have them back. That emotional maturity is so crucial. And you will learn, women say all the time, I don't want to waste my time in a relationship. You don't want to waste your time in a relationship. Talk about what you need. Now, we're not doing that on the first date, right? You're not going to get all high and mighty, but over time, this is how I like to communicate. I love to be able to see you. Mark and I's deal was like once during the week, once on the weekends. Then that evolved to seeing each other more and more, right? I like a good morning text if that's something you like. Now, again, they're imperfect. They can miss a couple days, but when you're out on vacation or you're out with your boys, I just love a good night and that's it, right? So be practical too. So communicate your needs, right? Don't play games. So that's it. Those are the green flags in relationships. And green flags aren't just for what makes a good partner, but they're what makes a relationship work. And we didn't even talk about this, but do you have these flags, right? If there are things that you're expecting of someone else, but you're not providing back, then That's not how we do it, right? You need to have the same flags. And again, if you're used to this chaotic relationship, stability might feel weird at first. I want to validate that, validate it, like accept that that's going to happen. Because once you're like, oh yeah, there's that, feeling that Christina said I was going to feel, this is totally normal, but don't mistake that for lack, right? It's not a lack of connection. And I want to know, what green flags did I overlook, right? Because I just want to give you a general idea. These are ones that really help build a foundation, right? And they're things that, especially in relationships, that over time will grow into the most beautiful thing. You just need to get past the discomfort of, he's so nice, it's kind of boring, it's vanilla. When my clients say that, I'm like, yes, we are on the right track. So awesome. If you like this information, or you know someone who might need to hear this, please share this with someone. Or if you're feeling really kind, I'd love a 5-star rating and review. Please, if you haven't already, follow or subscribe to our channels. We're on anywhere you can find podcasts, as well as YouTube. You can also follow me on Instagram at Dating Deja Vu Pod. And green flags are so important. They're so important. You need to have them in yourself so that you can see them from someone else, because it might feel like deja vu, but it also might be you. Goodbye.